Hello, welcome to the first of our video podcast series here at MKU. I'm Christian, I'm the Innovation Hub Manager at MKU, and today I'm interviewing Professor Lynette Ryals OBE, who is a Pro-Vice Chancellor at Cranfield University and Chief Executive of MKU. Welcome, Lynette.
Thank you.
So, as we start, tell me a bit about your background and tell me a bit about how you got into the position you are in today.
So I am an economist by training, and I had some experience of working as a management consultant before I joined Cranfield over 20 years ago. And I've done a range of different roles at Cranfield, culminating in the most recent one, which I took on 3 years ago as Chief Executive of MKU.
Excellent. And how has that experience led to the position you're in now at MKU?
I've had a really great experience at Cranfield of working in a number of roles, moving from being an academic and a senior lecturer and a professor, running an academic department, and then taking on a role as a Pro-Vice Chancellor, looking at education across the university, then went back into the School of Management to run the School of Management, and then, as I said, most recently taking on the MKU project. So I would say that that's a combination of the skills of managing a team of academics and their research and education portfolios, and then managing the strategy and developing the wider strategy across Cranfield for education and really learning more about the different parts of the university. And then finally taking on the MKU role and really applying both those, the sort of the financial and management side of things, but also the education side of things to how we're thinking through MKU.
Brilliant. So let's talk about MKU. So really, what is the idea behind MKU? What does it do and where does it sit?
The original concept of MKU came from some work that Milton Keynes Council did when Milton Keynes was 50 years old. So it's a new city. And they decided to think about, if you like, the next phase of its growth. So this was about 2016, 2017. And they set up a commission called the Milton Keynes Futures 2050 Commission. And that came up with some ideas about the next stage of growth for Milton Keynes, saying that actually for the next phase of its development, there were a number of things it needed to do. And one of those, what was called the 6 big projects, one of those was to have its own residential campus university with all of the benefits that brings, both in terms of the culture of the city, the economy, having the student body there, and of course the opportunity to attract businesses and help people to skill up. So that was really the idea, the foundation idea of MKU. And then moving forward from that, Milton Keynes Council went out to tender, and they asked for tenders for higher education institutions who would lead as the lead academic partner for MKU. And Cranfield University and the team I led at Cranfield won that opportunity to become the lead higher education provider. So essentially what we're doing is we are developing MKU in partnership with Milton Keynes Council and then subsequently, of course, our business supporters.
Brilliant. So just expand a bit more, how does that then sit within Cranfield? How does MKU work in the Cranfield sort of setup?
From a governance perspective, we MKU are, at the moment, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Cranfield. So we're part of the Cranfield University group. But the eventual idea is for MKU to grow and become a university in its own right and have its own degree awarding powers. Now that takes some months or years to develop. So in the meantime, Cranfield is not only our parent institution, it's also our degree awarding body. So the degrees that will be awarded from MKU are Cranfield undergraduate degrees.
Excellent. So let's now go back to the start then. Tell me about how did MKU start from your perspective, and when were you approached, and what were the first decisions you were asked to make about MKU?
It's a really interesting question about what you do first on such a big project, because it has so many different dynamics. We looked at what could the position be, because I think that was the most important thing, even going back as far as when we were talking to Milton Keynes Council and making our presentation about how we would move this forward, we were thinking about, well, how would that fit into Milton Keynes, and also how would it fit into higher education in the UK? So actually the very first thing that we did was to look at higher education and obviously the existing provision, found that there wasn't very much at all in Milton Keynes. There is some, but not a lot. And we then thought about, well, what would be the offer, the kind of education offer that would fit with the sort of place that Milton Keynes is and really reflect the ethos and values of the city itself. And actually, I think there were two themes that very quickly emerged from that. One of those themes was technology. So Milton Keynes has for at least a decade been a real trailblazer in the adoption at scale of new technologies. So therefore there was definitely something about the digital economy and technology that was going to be part of the MKU offer. The second thing was actually entrepreneurship, because Milton Keynes is one of the most entrepreneurial places in the UK, and it has a very strong rate of small business formation, and it's very innovative and very dynamic, and we wanted to reflect that in MKU's education offering. So of course the very first courses that we have started with have reflected those beginnings. We've started with data and digital and cyber courses and business and entrepreneurship courses.
Excellent. So taking that, building on that story then, once you've agreed what you're going to offer, where did you go from there? What sort of input was vital in those first sort of few steps of MKU?
We had input from a number of partners, including on the research side. So we used a research partner to look more broadly at the landscape. We talked to the other higher education providers and FE colleges, particularly Milton Keynes College itself, and of course their Institute of Technology and the schools. So we took a very broad approach to thinking about what the regional needs were to shape the offer. But I think most importantly, very early on, we had decided that this was going to be for business with business. So actually those business consultations started in the very early days and they've continued. So our business supporters group, which launched in 2019, was perhaps about 40 or 50 companies when we launched, and is now well over 100 companies and growing every week.
That's really impressive, and it's great to see the Milton Keynes community really get behind MKU in the way they have.
The other part of it is that we've also consulted with Milton Keynes Council, I've already mentioned, so the councillors have had input, and actually we've had some good political input. So not only the support that we've had from the council and from the Milton Keynes MPs, but I've also spoken to a number of government departments who have given their thoughts and input on what the national skills needs are.
That's really interesting. What have some of the thoughts been regarding government? Where have they seen MKU fitting, and sort of what skills they think are really relevant?
The government input has been a lot around what the national skills gaps are, and we know that there are particular skills gaps in digital technology, and that's been even more clear as a result of the pandemic, because we've really seen the way that digital tech has come to the forefront. So that's been a part of government input to the MKU project. I also had some really interesting conversations with the Department for Education and the Office for Students. The Office for Students actually sponsored a project that helped us to work with Aston University and to develop a more innovative proposition for Cranfield, Aston and MKU. And I think the interest on the education side has been more about, let's say, challenging the existing model and bringing in new ways of thinking about higher education and actually delivering higher education, and also, of course, really delivering a more inclusive agenda.
And talking about this then, once you've talked to everyone, what were those next steps? What were those first decisions, and thinking about physical location or academics? How are these decisions made? Like, it's not something you get to do every day, really, start a university from nothing. So what are those first decisions you need to be making beyond sort of what we're going to offer?
And I definitely think I'm going to write the book on how to start a university when all this process is through, because you're right, there is no blueprint at all. So I think the first thing that we really did was to divide the work into the main work packages. So we had work packages or work streams that were around education, which we've already spoken about. Also something about technology and the delivery of education. Of course, there was finance one, there was a resourcing one, there was a location one. So we had all these different work streams. And actually one of the innovations that our projects manager brought in was that we meet as a team, and we continue to meet as a team every single week. And it's just for half an hour, but we exchange updates on all of these work streams. And of course, some more work streams have been added. Your own Innovation Hub is a new work stream that's been added, thanks to the support from SEMLEP for that work. And so we bring work streams in. Some of them we have to pause, and then we report to one another. And that ethos of thinking about how we exchange information and how we keep one another up to date is something that's survived since the very early days. We also did work with the whole team. We did drop-in sessions, and they were looking at various things around culture and style, because I think, to me, that's also important, is about how were we going to be as an organisation? What was it going to be like to work at MKU? What was it going to be like to be a business partner of MKU? And so we did a lot of work where we, again, were very inclusive with the team, and we had partners who would join us for some of these sessions and give their input, and we'd talk about, well, how will it work with these different groups of people? So very much being collaborative, consultative, collegiate. That was really the first approach. And again, we've tried to retain that culture going forward. So I would say that the kind of practical program management aspects were very much one of the first things we did. But pretty soon after that, we realised the importance of developing the culture and style of the organisation.
Brilliant. And yes, those meetings do still continue to this day. It's very impressive. Talking a bit about that then, let's talk about location, because sort of being based in Milton Keynes, is a very busy town. There's a lot going on. How did you find the point about finding a physical location to teach, particularly around a pandemic where suddenly we were unable to leave the house and we had to think about education in a slightly different way?
And it was really interesting, and it was actually serendipity. I happened to have a conversation where I'd had a number of conversations, in fact, with Milton Keynes Development Partnership, who have been extremely supportive of MKU and really recognise the value for the growth and future development of Milton Keynes. And they suggested that they actually had a building that we could use for our piloting. And by that point, we had already secured permission from Cranfield University Council that we could proceed with a pilot test of the first courses. So it really all came together beautifully in a way I think that's really about what a partnership can deliver. That MKDP and Milton Keynes Council and Cranfield were really working together to solve that problem. So yes, we have a great location in the centre of Milton Keynes. And then, of course, the next part of that, and a partner that came in, the very first business partner that came in, was Santander, who have been fantastically supportive throughout. And they were in the process of transferring their operations or their headquarters to Milton Keynes. And so that's been, again, a fantastic partnership. But very early on, Santander came out in public, backed MKU, and they put some capital behind it. We were able then also to get some funding from SEMLEP. We've had 2 tranches, one for education and one for the Innovation Hub, and the support from the Office of Students. So building all of that together enabled that development both of a physical location and of the delivery and the education that we're going to deliver through that location. I will say that I think when you're doing something like this, having a touchdown space, a location, is actually really important in a project like this. It puts the heart into it. And we've always had an MKU touchdown space where the team could go. So in the early days, it was actually on the Cranfield Tech Park. And then we've now moved across, of course, to Bouverie House. And that, I think, is important for the staff, and it's important for our business supporters to come and see what we're doing, and we host events there. And it's also important for our learners themselves to feel that there is that community, that heart, that place that's for them. You asked about the COVID pandemic. Well, of course, that has made us think about how we use the space. Actually, we had already made at MKU a lot of the decisions that have paid off during the pandemic. We'd already made the decision that we were going to invest in very good learning technology, and we'd already made the decision that we wanted to be as flexible as possible with how that learning was delivered, whether it was face-to-face or online. And those decisions have been exactly the right ones given the pandemic. So we weren't in the same place as a lot of other universities who really perhaps majored on face-to-face delivery and have had to do a switch across. And we weren't in that position. We were already developing our education in that way.
It's been incredible to see, and seeing the reaction as well when we started to open up to students and how much they've enjoyed the space and enjoyed what we've done there has been really good. Let's take a bit of time to reflect on that now. So as someone who is, as you say, writing the blueprint on launching a university, what are some of the things that you think actually as an individual you really need, and even as a team, what are sort of the key mindsets and skills if anyone else was thinking of doing this? What would they need, and what sort of mentality do you think it takes to launch a university?
I think it's really interesting because there's a lot about a kind of entrepreneurial mindset and innovative mindset. And I think a lot of the people who are attracted to work with MKU are attracted to work with us because of that approach around being different by design, as Milton Keynes is, and taking that collaborative view, but thinking differently and being prepared to challenge the norm. And I think that's important as a mindset as the leader of that organisation, but I think it's important as a cultural mindset as well. So one example is that the approach that we take to designing courses at MKU is that every time we have a new subject that we want to address, we don't start at the beginning, we start at the end. And we start by going to companies, putting together groups of companies and working parties, and we say, at the end of the process, by the end of the process, what does that graduate of that course, what do they need to be like? What do they need to be able to do? And then we work back from that to figure out how we design the course and get them to that point. So that approach of consulting with businesses until we've got a really clear idea of what the end point is, and then working back in the design, has actually been a really interesting way to design education. And of course, it's meant that from day one of every new subject area, we've had companies engaged in that process and engaged in that conversation.
Excellent. So let's take from that then, Milton Keynes is a very unique place. MKU is going to be a very unique university. What are some of the things, in addition to what we already discussed, that you think really make MKU feel unique and different?
I think that our focus on the application, not just the theory, we do deliver the theory, but not just the theory, but how knowledge is applied to address real business and social problems is important. So the fact that all of our curriculum uses problem-based learning is extremely unusual. The fact that we have listened to companies and they've told us repeatedly that they don't just need deep technical skills, they need people who are more rounded individuals, who are more flexible, who can learn to learn, if you like. So the fact that we've hardwired professional skills into every single one of our courses, I think that's another important part of our distinctiveness. And then as we go forward, the fact that we will be really driving this digital technology, new technologies and technical type of education, I think will be a very, very distinctive positioning that will fit well, it will serve MKU well, and I believe it will serve Milton Keynes well and indeed the wider region.
Excellent. So expanding on that, one of the things that we're really keen on is degree apprenticeships. Do you want to talk a little bit about what a degree apprenticeship is and why we've chosen to work with degree apprenticeships before traditional undergraduate degrees?
Degree apprenticeships are a way of taking your degree whilst also working. And one of the reasons that we are particularly interested in degree apprenticeships is because they are a great example of how higher education, a degree level education that allows you to tackle complex problems and more complex thinking, how all of that can fit together with the actual application in the workplace. So how it works is that the government and the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education approves apprenticeship standards that are based on roles that relate to the workplace. So they're developed by industry groups, obviously with some advice from higher education institutions, but they're developed from those roles that people are going into, and they set out a series of knowledge, skills, and behaviours that apprentice needs to gather during their degree apprenticeship. So what we have to do as the delivery partner for the companies who are bringing their apprentices to us is we have to make sure that we've delivered those knowledge, skills and behaviours in a way that can be independently assessed in something called the endpoint assessment, at which point the apprentice completes their apprenticeship. But of course they've also gained their Cranfield undergraduate degree. One of the other reasons why we really like this, apart from the fact that it's applied, it's working with business, is that this is a very good way of widening participation. Degree apprenticeships are really good for people who don't have a traditional academic background, but bring, let's say, a few years of workplace experience. And we have apprentices on our programmes who say things like, I would never have thought that university was for me. I could never have seen myself doing a degree, but they absolutely love that application and the way that actually their practical experience more than compensates for them not having a traditional academic background.
And I think that's something that MKU is really, really pioneering, I think, in a lot of cases, that pushing new degree apprenticeship standards in some cases. From your perspective, how do you think the addition of degree apprenticeships is going to change students' opinions, and particularly in the changing world of work we're looking at in the next sort of 10, 20 years? Where do you think degree apprenticeships are going to sit, and where do you think MKU is going to sit in terms of the sort of ever-evolving, changing world of work going forward?
We are seeing a lot of increasing interest in degree apprenticeships from companies and also from students themselves. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that in a traditional degree, you would be out of the workplace for 2, 3, 4 years and building up all that student debt. Now, with a degree apprenticeship, the fees, the tuition fees, are covered by your employer. So it comes out of their apprenticeship levy. So the students who are graduating from a degree apprenticeship are graduating without student debt. So we think that's really a really important factor in making that a very attractive pathway. So I think the inclusivity, the applied not part of the knowledge, skills and behaviours, and also the graduating without debt is important. How that might play into the bigger picture for companies, actually, I think there are still a lot of companies who aren't making the use that they could of their apprenticeship levy, and so effectively it becomes a tax. The only way you can get it back is by spending it on upskilling your workforce. I think that's one thing that more companies are starting to get to grips with now, and we'll see even more of that going forward. I do think potentially the other implication for the higher education landscape is that we tend to have a model, particularly in the UK, of front-end loading higher education. So it all happens by the time you're 21 and then you go out into the workplace. I think apprenticeships offer a really interesting alternative to that. So we know with our Santander apprentices, for example, that all of those apprentices are actually people who are already working within the bank. So in other words, they're people who have left school, not gone to university, gone to work, and now this is opening up for them a new channel to come back at a slightly older age and to skill up. And I think that's a really important way of thinking differently about higher education, that actually given that people are working for longer, they're typically having more different jobs, that actually what we need to do is not front-end load it all and say it all finishes by the time you're 21 and that's it. We need to think about that lifelong learning model. And I do think that apprenticeships will have a really important part to play in that.
That's fascinating. How do you think then that changes the way the university acts in some cases, where we're not just expecting 18-year-olds all sort of straight out of school? How are we making adjustments to MKU to reflect that?
And it's a really interesting question. And in fact, when we are being evaluated on our apprenticeships, that is absolutely one of the things that the Office for Students wants to, and the Institute for Apprenticeships, they want to see. They want to see that we are genuinely recognising that apprentices aren't quite the same as, if you like, your more traditional undergraduate student. So there is a difference between an apprentice and a student. How do we accommodate that and how do we shape that? I think the main thing is the important input that we get from our business partners. So the fact that our business supporters join our advisory boards, they take part in our development workshops, they come and deliver some of the sessions for us, that's really important in helping us to work with them. Another thing that we've done, reaching out to companies, is, for example, we will provide briefings for apprenticeship line managers. And that's really helpful for companies to really understand how the apprenticeship journey is a little bit different from the traditional student journey. And the line managers and the companies themselves need to provide some support as well to make that happen. Huge returns to them when they do that successfully. So I think that we've got a strong focus here on thinking of this as a three-way relationship. It's a relationship between us, MKU, the apprentice as the student, and the employer.
Okay, so we're coming towards the end of our interview now, but just as a final sort of passing thoughts, what does the future look like for MKU? Where are we going with it, and what's your grand vision for MKU?
The future is really very positive. Of course, it was a setback that we didn't get the big chunk of government funding that we tried for in the last spending review. I won't deny that was a disappointment, and we were hoping to do that so that we could develop a location in Milton Keynes that the Milton Keynes Council has already identified and has actually already been designated in the local plan as being for higher education. So we were looking to move very quickly to a big capital build there. However, capital build is just buildings, and actually what's been happening in the meantime is that not only have the MPs and the leader of Milton Keynes Council reiterated their support for MKU, but Cranfield University has reiterated its support for us, and in fact are now encouraging us to move forward and to expand our education portfolio and to grow and really think about, how can we do this? What are the next steps? So I would say that the next immediate step for MKU is to talk to companies, because that's the theme of how we do things. And we've already been hearing from companies who say to us, oh, could you do this? Could you do this thing? Could you do that thing? Can you do a boot camp, a short course, a different kind of apprenticeship? And we can now start to look at that, and we can work with Santander and BA Systems and Grant Thornton and our other business partners. We can actually work with you to develop new courses and different offerings. And it's all about playing into that. What are the skills gaps? What is it that companies need? And where are the shortages right now we can do something about?
Well, excellent. That is amazing. It sounds like we're in a lovely position going forward. I'm really looking forward to see how we grow, and as our team grows, what the future holds for MKU. Well, thank you for your time today, Lynette. It's been a wonderful interview, really insightful. And we look forward to potentially having you on again, and we'll talk a bit more detail as the university grows. But thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.